A very good afternoon and a pyar bhara namaskar to all the viewers from India and across the globe. On behalf of Sir Vittal Das Thakursi College of Home Science, SNDT Women's University, Mumbai, I, Ms. Himani Malhotra, Associate Professor from the Department of Resource Management, thank all the participants who have joined us today on Zoom and on Facebook to the second day of the international webinar on Global Scenario of Practices, Perspectives, and Sustainability in Designing Spaces. Sir Vittal Das Thakursi College of Home Science is the constituent college of SNDT Women's University. It is the first college to get autonomous status in the state of Maharashtra. The exemplary work in academics, research, and community outreach has enabled the college to maintain its autonomous status for the last 3 decades. According to the Education World 2020, it is the first autonomous college of home science in the city of Mumbai. Dr. Jagmeet Madan is the principal of the college and an expert in the area of nutrition and dietetics. Ms. Manjari Bhalerao, vice principal and associate professor, is from the Department of Resource Management. Our college is accredited by NAC and we have scored an A grade in the third cycle. The University Grants Commission (UGC) has given us the coveted honor as college with potential for excellence for 3 continuous phases. The total CPE grant is 3.25 crores. Our college is also the recipient of the prestigious RUSA 2 infrastructure grant of 2 crores given by Rashtriya Uchchatar Shiksha Abhiyan, Government of India. These grants have helped us improve the physical and academic infrastructure. It has also enabled us to offer innovative academic programs. Under the aided program, there are 5 departments and offer 7 specializations at undergraduate level under the Faculty of Home Science. We have 7 specializations for BSc regular as well as for BSc honors program. The self-finance programs include 2 master's programs, which are the flagship programs of our college. They are MSc in Specialized Dietetics, M Design, Fashion Design under the Faculty of Interdisciplinary Studies. We also offer several certificate and diploma programs, value-aided programs with blended learning pattern, and short-term online courses. Please visit our website www.svt.edu.in for further details. This international webinar is presented by the Department of Resource Management. We offer 2 specializations at the degree level. They are Hospitality and Tourism Management, Interior Design and Resource Management. We also offer certificate and diploma programs in Computerized Interior Space Design and Management. This course trains the students to integrate various competencies which include critical thinking, problem solving, knowledge application, creativity, leadership, entrepreneurial ability, and increased research temperament. The course is designed keeping in mind the recent trends and expectations of the various operational areas of hospitality and tourism management. Hence, it covers an array of subjects like food production, food and beverage administration, front office operation, customer relationship management, housekeeping, etc. The Hospitality and Tourism Management program helps students learn skill sets, excellent communication and interpersonal skills, develop an inclination towards grooming, etiquettes, food and beverage, geography, travel, and an inherent compassion towards service to people. In the Hospitality and Tourism Management program, there are not only subjects related to the hotel industry, travel and tourism industry, but also which prepares the student to work in the corporate sector or to start their own entrepreneurial venture. The program encompasses training in various aspects of the business of hotel and travel and tourism related industries. It has a systematic approach for students to comprehend the working components of a hotel and travel operations. The course is designed keeping in mind the recent trends and expectations of the designing field. Hence, it covers an array of subjects like ergonomics, product design and development, set design, landscape design, upscaling of dry waste, which is a need of the hour, and many more. This course trains the students to be creative, have the urge to explore newer designing trends, appreciate architectural and interior works, have a bent towards contemporary arts and crafts, and above all, curious to learn and innovate. The students of interior design and resource management learn to design a wide range of spaces and can explore a number of career paths, including freelancing and styling, set designing, accessory consultation, project manager, retail designing, graphic designing, and visual merchandising. The program has a dynamic approach as it drives the students to research and reinvent through varied perspectives to perform better. The annual exhibition Nirmiti is a popular event which showcases the creative work of our students. The students have demonstrated skills for sustainability practices by converting some of the discarded pieces of furniture and material from college and other places into concept based products. The COVID 19 crisis demonstrates that we need global solutions to global challenges, and colleges and universities all around the globe have taken a step forward and have started collaborating. This international webinar is a collaboration of the Department of Resource Management with architects and designers from Italy and Canada. May I now request Ms. Parul Vats, faculty from the Department of Resource Management, to kindly introduce the first speaker for the day, architect Shrey Upadhyaya. Over to you, Parul, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to join you all on this platform today and excited about the insights to design we'll get to have. We have with us two young and dynamic architects who will be sharing their knowledge with us. I'm extremely elated to introduce our first guest today, architect Shrey Upadhyaya. What's special about him is that he is an action taker. He lives by the line, the distance between you and everything you want is the amount of action you take. As you listen about his journey, you will notice that at different stages of his life, he said yes, even before he had it figured out and it paid off. Shrey Upadhyay is an architect and landscape designer, holding a Master of Science degree in Sustainable Architecture and Landscape Design from Politecnico di Milano, Italy. Shrey is presently collaborating with Marazzi Architects in Parma, Italy. He is primarily responsible for residential, public space architecture, and landscape design and works also as a visualizer in the studio. Prior to collaborating with the current studio, Shrey has worked in architecture and landscape studios in both Italy and India, along with working as a freelancer in the same field. His academic and professional experience has provided him with sufficient expertise on theories, methods, and application of sustainable architecture, urban design, and of landscape design. So, ladies and gentlemen, give a massive round of a virtual clap to our very special guest, architect Shrey. Now, I would request our guest to take over the session further. Over to you, sir.
Hello everyone, I am Shrey Upadhyay. Firstly, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Parul, for this introduction, for this beautiful introduction. And thank you, SPDT College for inviting me. And thank you, Chetna ma'am, for giving me this opportunity to be present here in front of all the students and the panelists and presenting whatever my experience is. I know it's not like I'm not so experienced in this field of architecture. I'm young, but still, ma'am, I would like to share whatever I can from my end with all of you. And so let's start off firstly by the experience, like the journey. Let's say, so for all the students and for all the panelists here, I would like to share my journey till now with all of you. So first of all, I started off by, giving it, saying a yes to the things, no, like Parul said, like always be accepting to ideas, accepting to, new opportunities, because if you are not accepting, you will always lack in something. That's what I believe, Apart from this, whenever you are pursuing a bachelor's or a master's, the most important point to be kept in mind, according to me, is a choice, is the choice of what you have to choose in life. Never be in a hurry, always be relaxed, always take your decisions with a calm mind, relaxed mind, because what choice gives you. For example, I'll give you an example. When I was doing my bachelor's, I wanted to go for master's. I had this thought initially. No, initially I was thinking there is no point, I should do my bachelor's here, spend my 5 years and start with being an architect, practicing as an architect in India as well. But then slowly, once 3 years passed, 4 years passed, I started to be open to opportunities, be open to accepting opportunities otherwise also. So the first and the most important point is choice. What choice gives you is you should first choose what you want in life. Never make a decision in a hurry. Think about what kind of specialization you want to do after your bachelor's, if you want to go in a particular field. Because if you take a decision in a hurry, I personally believe that you will always there will be a probability that you will regret the decision later. But there is no point to do so. Take a decision with calmness, with a calm mind, and always evaluate all the possibilities that you're going to have later. Second point that I would like to say is open mindset. Okay, so now this point is very, all the points that I'm trying to share with all the people right here are more related to professional as well as academic life, like all your academic, personal, and as well as your professional life. Let's put it like this. So why open mindset is important? For example, if you are in India and you are moving to another country, open if you have an accepting and an open mindset, it will give you always the freedom, a freedom in your personal and your professional life. Why? Because if you are ready to accept the ideas of people, for example, there are so many students that were studying with me, and they had an experience. Like, for example, yesterday also, Sushma was here. Sushma had an enormous experience before she started to do her masters. And this is what gives you, if you have an open mindset. For example, when you are going abroad to study, whatever you are going, either you are studying in India or you're going abroad, if you have an open mindset, it will always give you the possibility to interact with people with huge experiences, with fresh ideas. And if you are ready to accept them, it will really be helpful for each one of you. I mean, I'm not saying that no one, you have to always accept and just follow the ideas of other people. No, but it is very important, according to me, to accept the ideas, evaluate them, and then use them in your own personal life. Apart from this, open mindset, like I said before, is also very, very important when it comes to moving to a new country. Why? Because if you are open with your mindset, you will be able to accept new things in life, which I mean is like a new culture, a new language, new food, because these are few of the challenges that come once you leave your own country. You leave India, you move on to Europe, you move and go to America, you go to Australia. There will be people with new experience, new language, new food. You will find different things. That's not what you find in your day-to-day life, in everyday life. So what I mean to say is that this open mindset really provides you with a very, with a very good opportunity to accept new things in life and, learn from them. The third thing is the challenge, which is a comfort zone, which is the most important, I think so, the most crucial time of your life, because you technically leave your comfort zone. You are out of your comfort zone and you enter a zone which you don't really be every day. It's a thing that, like, for example, when you are with your parents, when you are living in your own country, when you know the language, when you know the food, you are in your own comfort zone. But this is what is the beauty of going for something new, accepting something new in life, because change is the new constant. Let's put it like this: the new normality is change now. And later, once I speak about it in my projects also, that I'm going to speak like very soon, another 5 minutes or something like this, I'm going to talk about these points also, change, flexibility, modularity, how adapting to new things can really provide you with a very nice experience in life. It can give you platforms that you can really excel in life. When I was planning to come for masters, I was very sure about the fact that, okay, I'm going to Europe. There, it's going to be a new language. It's going to be a new kind of, culture for me, but I was really ready to accept it. I was really ready to go out of my comfort zone and accept it. And I'm telling you honestly, it has been a beautiful journey till now. I mean, I really enjoy each and every day of my life. And like before, I was speaking with all the panelists, and we were talking about, the difference between surviving and living. You can obviously survive if you're not open to ideas, if you're not open to accepting new culture, new things, new food. You can survive, because in these days of this international, you get everything. You get your food, you get everything everywhere. You can speak English, people are going to accept it, it's not a problem, but you are just going to survive. But in order to live a good life, a happy life, you need to be, these are the things that according to me. Then obviously it's a sea in front of you. You gotta choose what you want to do in life, but it's a sea full of opportunities. But these are just a few points that were, according to me, very important to be shared with all of you, and I really hope it will be helpful. And now I shall move on to my presentation. I know it's a bit of a different side which I'm gonna show all of you. It's majorly core architecture and landscape design, but I really hope that all this information that I'm sharing with you, you can relate it, you can use it as concepts in your learning, in your expertise, in your subjects, in order to whatever I'm going to talk about. You can take the inspiration. If you feel what I'm sharing with you is really helpful, you can take the inspiration and apply it according to what is important for you in your field. So I would just like to share my screen. So today I'm going to speak about, all the main idea, which are the practices, perspectives, and sustainability in designing spaces. My topic is flexibility and modularity in contemporary living spaces. So what is flexibility and modularity? I would start with that. Flexibility and modularity is a concept that leads to adaptability. You need to adapt to today. Like I said before, everything is changing. It's constantly evolving. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is stationary. It's continuously evolving. So what flexibility and modularity gives you, it gives you the idea that you can adapt. You can adapt to changing needs. You can adapt to changing future. Now with COVID-19 going on, I personally believe that flexibility and modularity, especially in living spaces, is one of the most critical and important concepts that one needs to keep in mind when they are designing. So how and why is it important for all the students here of the Department of Interior Design and Resource Management? According to me, all this flexibility and modularity not just gives you the idea to adapt to new things, to let's say to constantly evolving needs of the current generation and even the future generation. Now we are not living in the old times, when everything was designed according to some, let's say, some set of needs by a set of people. Now everyone wants to live together. There is this co-living and co-living that is going on. Even in Western countries, people are living together. You are never designing for one particular kind of society, and you are never also designing for one particular kind of need. Let's put it like this. What I mean to say is that if you design a space, an object of, I don't know, a piece of furniture or a huge building, you never know that tomorrow will the building or the object give you the exact same kind of use that was before, or it's going to change. So how can you as designers, as responsible designers, let's put it like this, help the people? And according to me, what this flexibility and modularity can give you is this adaptation to different needs, all these different constantly changing needs of, like I said, the present generation and as well as the future generation. So I would first start with one project that I just finished 3 weeks back, let's say. It's a residential project that we did in Samara, Russia. So it's like a township. We were designing this huge township, and which was for 1,660 apartments that were more or less 3,300 people living in this township. So this was the area. Now, why I really wanted to highlight this project side is because we in India really have this kind of, we really, in our day-to-day life, we really face this kind of situation when the city center is completely full, and it's completely, like you see in this on the right hand side, where you see the project side and you see the city center completely, urbanized, completely built. But then you are, like for example, I'm from New Delhi. In New Delhi, there is this around New Delhi is kind of full, in terms of construction, in terms of people living. So it's expanding every day. It's expanding to Gurgaon. It's expanding towards Noida. Now it has become, the NCR has become the New Delhi. So it's soon happening in all the cities, the major cities in Delhi, in India, sorry. Like Bangalore, slowly is evolving. It's growing, it's growing. So what I really need to say is that the situations are changing, but still the answer where it lies is what we are searching for as responsible designers. Our idea started from a concept. What I mean by concept here is that it's not a concept that we started that, okay, we are going to make the building look like this because we took a concept like this. No, the idea of the concept in our designing of this project was how to amalgamate, how to interact with what is existing. Firstly, it's a very sensitive kind of a situation that we are working on in this project. But apart from this, always respecting the vernacular architecture, let's say, the old architecture, the existing architecture of the place. So our idea was that we wanted to come up with an urban rural model. The proposal was to have the two qualities of the model, which is in the urban life, which is the intensity of the city, and the comfort of the countryside. Because why did we come to this concept? The main reason was the vernacular architecture of Russia. In this, and plus for us Indians who are culturally very driven by our architecture, whether it's architecture or it's design, let's say, for all the people, all the students, all the panelists here, it's very important for us as Indians to have a cultural, like a concept which is driven culturally. So in this project that we did, our idea was driven by a dacha. Dacha is a typology of Russian architecture, which they have, in which they have these old wooden kind of houses, in which they have their own greens, their own place where they can cultivate their, gardens. They can have their hobbies, passions, plants, vegetables, and then they have their old kind of living. So our idea was that how can we answer, this need of the urban need with you by using this concept. No, so what we came up was a house and green for all. So what our idea was that each apartment, even if there are 1,700 apartments in this township, every apartment should have their outdoor space. It's very important, especially in the time of COVID, that we all realize that how an outdoor space can really change the way you live. Even if it's a small apartment, if it's a penthouse or a big apartment, it's very important to have a small terrace, a small greenhouse, a small loggia that they say, which is like a real extension of the house, where you can actually go out and do your things, do other things that you cannot do inside. Get in contact with nature, get in contact with other things, which are not just the things that are, in our day-to-day life, which are very, let's say, the intensity like we are talking about of the life. So that was the main concept. So slowly we started evolving our scheme, the idea behind this project, and it was the court model that we came up with. The idea, a very Italian idea, which is a courtyard. And also we as Indians relate to it, because in Indian culture, we have this very strong idea of courtyard. Why I am trying to always provide you with information which all of us can relate. We as Indians can relate, and also because I'm working in Italy, we here, people in Italy, have this idea of living in a courtyard. So we started with this court model, which guarantees like protection, open spaces, insulation, and all this kind of thing. then we were like, okay, let's now come down to functionalist approach as well, because in Russia it is very important, this functionalism which is in their roots, but we did not want to come up with a solution which is very Soviet, which is very regular. So we wanted to break it, and that is what we started to do in the third point, which says here, which is the building splitting. So what our idea was, we wanted to design morbid spaces, soft spaces, rather than just townships which have a lot of apartments running across these big huge line of residential apartments. It's boring, let's say. Like, we wanted to do something a bit more dynamic to answer to the needs of the people. So we started with this, multiple views. We started to let's say, intervene our design and go inside the surroundings, try to use what is there right next to us and inside us. So what we created was this is the scheme that we came to, which was like a smart building massing. What our idea was to enhance the views towards the landscape and maximize the buildability of the plot. So what it gave us, it gave us a scheme which was very vibrant, which you will see here. So even if you see this master plan, which is very, very flexible, modular. So what our idea was that when we were doing the master plan, we started working on the module, which I'm going to discuss with you just after these 2 or 3 slides. The module, which was like a 8 by 8 meter grid. The space was very flexible, very modular, but the idea was to create a dynamic living space. So that is how we came to this solution, which you see here. Yes, it's Russia, it's full of snow. It's a bit different because our context was very industrial, let's say, because the city center is on the top that you see here, but we are completely outside. We were in a very industrial sort of area, but we still wanted to give the people, a different kind of environment. We wanted them to have these flexible modular spaces. So that is why you see all the housing units have been given, whether they are facing the courtyard or they are facing the exterior, they have been provided with a balcony, a loggia, a terrace, where they can cultivate their hobbies, like I said before. And not just that, now we'll be moving a bit into detail in this project on how we provided them with flexible and modular spaces. So here we can clearly see the idea was not to make just the building completely come, and stand as a huge unit. We wanted a scheme that is very connected, not just with each other, but also with the other services that we are going to provide. So in between, in the section that you see here, you will see that on the right and the left are the residential units, but in the center is the entire courtyard that you're going to see in the visualizations now that we're going to share with you. So this is the front. So what our idea was that all this flexibility and modularity that I'm talking about, later you will see in the plans, it's a very simple plan. It's a very, very fixed plan, which is giving the spaces to the people, but still the outlook of what you are trying to achieve with this flexible and modular, which are simple spaces, but then the outlook of the product that you see, whether it's a product, whether even architecture is a product of what you are designing, let's say. But what you achieve is very vibrant, it's very dynamic. That's what's the idea. Here is the inside space. So if you see from outside to inside, it changes completely. That is what we wanted to give all the residents of the place. We wanted to give them a different kind of environment. We wanted that they should feel, like we said before in the starting, our idea was to give them the intensity and the comfort and the coziness. So inside, when you see, we wanted to create all these kind of, let's say, what I said, the vernacular part of Russia. We wanted to bring it in. We wanted to bring it inside the living of the people. Now, I would like to stress really upon this layout, flexibility, and modularity. So what this plan and these schemes show you is that how a very, very simple scheme. So if you see here, which is the type A, it is like, okay, like I said before, now in this constantly evolving time, it is very important to not always have a very fixed layout. What I mean by a fixed layout is even if you're designing a very regular kind of structure, which is like this. If you see this, it has no sharp corners. It is not, there are no curves. It's a very regular kind of a building, It's a very simple, regular, fixed kind of a building. But then still, what are we offering to the people? The thing that we are offering to the people is the idea of this flexible space, that how you can configure the space. One kind of module can be configured into 6 different kinds of modules according to the needs of the people. So if tomorrow, what does this give you? This gives you the possibility that you can host in one building different kinds of people. You can host young people, you can host old people, you can host a mix of young and old people. It's a very communal kind of feeling. What I said before, the co-living, it promotes all these kind of effects. So with very small modifications, you can really achieve really, let's say, results which are really baffling. So these are the kind of spaces that we were talking about, the flexibility. So if you see here, we tried to make the loggia, which was the outside part, and obviously it's Russia, so it's closed because it's severe winter there. So we tried to, have it as a prototype that can be opened and closed, or obviously open during summers and closed during winters. How we wanted it to be an extension of the living space. Our loggia, our balcony should not just be a balcony outside, but it should be an extension. It should be a transparent space between the interior and the exterior. Now, this is the tower that we were seeing before in the renders, in the visualizations that we saw before. This is the huge tower. I will just go back to it so that we all can relate. I'm talking about this tower and this tower. So even if it's a tower, but our idea remained the same. We wanted to go with one module, a type A, which was a basic module, let's say, which had the 2 BHKs, because the entire, let's say, the entire complex was related to low income groups and medium income groups. And then we still gave them a possibility. Our idea was chosen because it was chosen as one of the best in the when the results came, because of this idea of that we gave them a possibility that they can achieve from one type, which is a 2 BHK apartment. They can really make it a 2 BHK with a 2 BHK duplex, with a 3 BHK, a 4 BHK. So it is never a fixed kind of thing that you give to the user. So what it provides you is with this flexibility, the adaptation to new needs, let's say. This is one of the representations that you see from the duplex apartment that you have. And it is like you see here, this one is a bit more lavish in terms of, because it was also, like we said before, it was not just for, we gave them an opportunity that you can provide this kind of apartments, not just to the lower income groups or the medium income groups, but also to the higher income groups. So it can give the real estate a really high, let's say, it's a very sustainable model, because at the end of the day, it's one module that is repeated, so many times, but still it is flexible. So what it gives you is different typologies, different answering to different needs. So like I said before, you never know that if the surroundings really, all the area which surrounds these apartments really grows tomorrow, for example, the people really have the possibility, the investors also have the possibility to change these apartments, to change and make them, for higher income groups as well, so that people can co-live together, let's say. So this is how it shows our idea. We provided the people with all this kind of vibrant spaces so that they can, cultivate their hobbies, grow their plants, exercise outside. So it's just not targeting one kind of people and one kind of, let's say, hobby. It's giving them the idea to evolve, to have flexible spaces. This is a visualization that we try to show that how even the interior space is flexible, the courtyard is flexible. It is used during the day as a school. All the part of the thing is used as a school, as a kindergarten and a senior secondary school. But then during the night when everything is closed, you can use the same space. So our idea was that how we don't need additional infrastructure, we can use what is the existing infrastructure. So this also relates to the flexibility and modularity of the space, not just in the interior living spaces, but also in the spaces that you provide for the people, how they can use the same space instead of creating newer infrastructure and wasting even more resources of the planet Earth, rather, using what is there in terms of different functions. I would like to move on to the next project. This one is a very conceptual kind of a project that we did. This was done in Czech Republic, in Prague. It was a highly conceptual proposal that we did. So it's not very well detailed, let's say, but the idea behind it remains the same. The idea was about the flexibility and modularity of the spaces, like I've been saying, you know. So what we started was something. It was a very different kind of. This project was very different because it was completely inside the city center. It was completely full of these kind of blocks and residential apartments already built around. So this was our plot, which you see in red, and our idea was to, and there were few conditions of this competition. It's also a competition entry that we did. There were few conditions of the competition that we had to maintain the shape of the plot. We couldn't do something very different. We had to maintain and we had to fill this, existing plot which is there. So our idea was to, building in coherence with this existing city fabric. So what it provides is a protected environment. Why? Again, with the concept of a courtyard, like I said before. Our idea was, again, to combine various lifestyles and living experiences, which is like a suburban garden living, urban living, and dream living. So what our idea, what I really want to stress upon again is how one space should not just be serving a particular kind of function. It should be flexible enough in order to host different people, host different functions, host different needs. So what I mean to say is, even if you're designing a residential, apartment scheme, living space for a particular kind of group, always have this kind of possibility. According to me, we should always have the possibility of having this, let's say, a slight flexibility in order to adapt to the different environments and the different needs. Because, like I said, you never know what will happen tomorrow. So what I mean by this tomorrow is that you never know how this building maybe doesn't even remain like a residential building tomorrow. So even the building layout should be designed in a way. Obviously, you cannot design everything that it will incorporate all the changes. Like, it cannot be that a residential building tomorrow has to be made into a cinema. I know it's a bit difficult to change complete uses, but what I mean to say is, still, you should have an idea that your space, your product can be flexible enough in order to incorporate different needs. So what we started was the urban relation. What is important in this scheme was that we wanted to provide the people with a lot of infrastructure inside, with co-working spaces, with gyms, with this, with all the kind of infrastructure that a person needs when they are searching for a house, let's say. But what we did was, we wanted to combine what is already existing in the surroundings. By what does it give us? This gives us the possibility of using, like I said, the existing infrastructure. Why do you want to create and use more resources in order to build something that is already existing in the surroundings? Why don't we use it? Why don't we as designers use what is around us and create something that lives in coherence with the things which are existing? So the idea here was also this: we wanted to integrate with the neighboring infrastructure and the activities, even the activities, for example, whether you're providing the leisure activity, provide what is missing. Try to find a problem. What we mean as a concept is, try to find a problem and answer to that problem. So if you're designing a product, for example, tomorrow, then first try to find the problem in what is lacking in the existing things, and then try to answer the thing with your design ideas. So This will always give you a very strong approach in designing. That's what I personally believe. Then our idea was amalgamation, how we can connect the condominium to the city and the neighborhood. So after this urban relation in which we were like, okay, we will build with the neighboring infrastructure and activities, but then we were like, okay, we are gonna let's say this condominium that we are going to provide to the people, we are going to connect it with the city. So all the part which is facing the main street, we started to give public activity. So what it gives us is it gives us the possibility to, like I said, coexist with the existing, coexist with what is there, with the existing infrastructures. It really helps us, it really helps us. It provides the people with flexible spaces. Now I will go ahead in detail with the plans. This is a very, because it was very functionalist way of designing in this, and its design is a very, you can say whether you like it or you don't like it, but the idea here was to have this functionalist approach, but yet a very, very, very flexible approach, keeping in mind always the same idea of providing the people with an exterior space in which they can really go out, cultivate their hobbies, live in a. So that is why we came with the idea of this green layers. So we were wanting to provide the habitants with diverse green experiences. So what does it mean? It means that we wanted to give them like private greens, we wanted to give them condominium greens. So what it means is that you can have a very protected environment but still have very different kind of spaces. If tomorrow you want to do something, inside this complex with people, you can still have the condominium rooftop greens. What it means is that you can use the infrastructure that you're building in order to provide the people or the residents with spaces that they can use inside, rather than again exploiting what is there, by creating a new infrastructure. So your building, even the public space that is here on the bottom, the idea of the public space was this. The idea was to provide the people with spaces that they can use by not creating additional infrastructure around, and not rather providing the people with infrastructure that they can use for let's say a multi-purpose space. Then we provided with different types of, like I said, private green balconies, condominium terrace greens, private gardens. So here in the plan, it's very visible. What this flexibility and modularity of spaces is giving us, it is giving us this idea of a phase development. What I mean to say is that all these different kinds of blocks can be made into phases. What it gives is the real estate perspective. Let's come to the real estate perspective. It is very important to have this flexibility when it comes to a phase development, because tomorrow this complete complex will not be built in one go. It will be built in phases. What our flexible module is giving us, that we are providing that, okay, you can achieve this complete residential complex in a period of 10 years, let's say 5 years, 10 years, something like this. But then also you will always have the possibility to connect all the different, let's say, individual blocks with each other, in order to, like I said, the idea was to have coherent scheme. So in order to achieve this coherent scheme, it is very important to design modular spaces. It's very important to design flexible spaces, so that tomorrow it gives you the possibility of a phase development, not just in terms of, let's say, real estate, but also in terms of urban design, in terms of this completing the block thing, coherent spaces. Then apart from this, what flexibility and modularity was giving us was the idea to have a very open ground floor space, provide the people with smart working spaces, provide the people with lockers where they can do deliveries, provide the people with spaces with people with private gardens on the ground floor, spaces which can be used by the people, like gym, hobby room, obviously targeting always the idea of COVID-19. You never know. Inside, you need to give the people, you need to reduce, and also not just, I hope I'm not confusing anyone by saying this, but it's very important also for the sustainability aspect of the planet, because the more services you provide, the more flexible spaces you provide in your design, in your architecture, the lesser the people will go out and start using other spaces. So what it gives us, that the less you travel, the less pollution you create. So everything is interlinked. So what I don't want to really, you know, move away from this topic and start a sustainability point of view. But what I mean to say is that these flexible and modular spaces really provide you with the opportunity to have sustainable spaces, to create this kind of sustainable model, which is obviously, people can use, people can really enjoy these kind of spaces. This is a typical floor plan. What it gives you is the same idea what the idea was in the arena park, in the other project that was in Russia. This is a completely different kind of project, but still the idea remains the same. Our idea was to create these modules of 8 meters, in which you will give the people a basic layout, but that basic layout can be reconfigured in order to achieve different kinds of environment, different kinds of spaces. Yet the people, whatever space you achieve, whatever apartment you make, whether it's a small apartment, which is a 2 BHK or a 1 BHK, you will always have an exterior space. You will always have a space that you can use in order to extend your house outside, because like always answering to the needs of the current pandemic. But not just today, because this is going to be the new normal. Let's say you will always need this kind of spaces. People are now always asking for smart working spaces. So our design always answers to these aspects. Let's say, for example, till yesterday we were never thinking that we are going to be working from home, but now with this pandemic we really want spaces that are very highly adaptable, highly flexible, highly modular. You cannot now create a space which is very fixed, that's so that tomorrow if you start working from home, you never know, you should still have even if you have a small apartment, even nobody is saying that you need to have 4 rooms in a house, but still you need to answer to these needs. We all as designers need to really, let's say, uh, come up with interesting ideas in whatever we design, so that tomorrow if it's a need to change the basic use of the thing and come up with a new use, let's say, like I'm saying, whatever, answering to the needs of the people, it is highly flexible, it is highly modular, it is highly adaptable. So what this scheme gave us, and I will end it with this, is the flexibility. It is the adaptation to a different type that can be achieved with very small modifications. What I mean is, if you see, this was a type A basic module in which there are 6 apartments that you see here. Then from type A to type B, even if you add small, very, very small walls inside the house, or you demolish few walls in order to achieve different spaces, you can achieve five apartments. One is small, 2 are big, for example. Then this is how, I don't want to go into the details of how we started to modify, but the idea, the concept was this. We wanted to give the people the possibility to change, the possibility to configure what they want, to answer to what they want, not what we are giving them. We can give them a basic solution, but then with, like I said, with their needs, the solution should be it should adapt to their needs. They should adapt to what they want. So because they are the real users, we so many times get answers to our solutions by understanding the use of the space. When they start using the space, they come up with problems. They tell us that this is the problem that we are facing. So then if your design is very rigid, very fixed, it can never accommodate the problems of the space, let's say. These are the different technical aspects that were there, which were like different types that we could achieve. And at the end, we came up with this co-living space, which was like a social and a lifestyle mix. So if you see, this complex was a proposal that could host all these different types of people, let's say from a young family to a newly retired to a young couple, because we always as people think, oh no, if students are living in a complex, then old people cannot live there, pet lovers cannot live there. But it's not true. Now the idea of spaces is very dynamic. People want to live together in these spaces. So I would like to end this talk by saying that I really would appreciate if someone, if whatever I have shared till now, all this information that I've shared till now would be highly important and knowledgeable for you, if it proves to be, that how you can use the concept of flexibility and modularity in order to achieve adaptable and let's say highly adaptable spaces, products, and designs. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful presentation. And now forum is open for questions and discussions. So please feel free to ask, or you can unmute yourself, or you can post your questions in the chat box. Anybody has any question?
Hello, Shrey. I would just like to congratulate you for the wonderful talk. It
Thank
was
you.
really, very wonderful how you have, spoken about the current needs, and especially with terms of connecting the environment to the interior spaces. I think this will be one of the first, not first, but yeah, initiative for all the designers to think from, incorporating the green and the natural element in the design, so that the interior space looks more, like a natural environment, and where they can design more better. So we have many interior designing students also who have been, a part of this webinar. So if, as a designer, interior designer, any suggestions from your end, if you can guide them so that they can incorporate natural environment even in their interior designing projects. So if you can give some guidelines or some tips on that.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, like I said before, one thing I really want to say, apart from just the green, I will come to it. Apart from this, I would really like to say that all the interior designers, according to me, should always, like we said, design spaces that can be evolved, that can be, flexible enough, in order to incorporate other needs, let's say. Then when it comes to green always helps. It gives you a different perspective to a space. It gives you a very vibrant and a very, like, you always feel, even if you have a small house, if you put the correct kind of plants, obviously you have to study what kind of plants can stay indoors, what kind of plants can stay in the bathrooms, what kind of plants can stay in your kitchen, because obviously you have to be very sensible, and you have to be very sensitive, let's say, in choosing your correct plants. But what I mean to say is that green and this idea of providing a hint of nature coming inside your spaces, it can really provide you with very comfort spaces when you're working. Also, if you see, you must have also, you must have also seen, if you are working in the exteriors, you are always more free. So if you are trying to bring this idea of green inside, it really provides you with a very natural yet a very soothing kind of environment in your interior. It calms the things down. It makes your spaces feel very live and very alive, let's say. And yes, yet again, it should be very modular, very adaptive to these needs. What I'm saying, what I was saying during my presentation as well. So yes.
So are there any challenges when you incorporate like green in our, interior spaces?
Yes, definitely there are many challenges when you if the most important challenge is to understand the correct kind of plants, the right kind of indoor plants that can stay. Because we always think that, okay, this type of typology of plant is an indoor plant, but it completely changes when you change the environment. If you are putting an indoor plant in your bathroom, because it's a humid kind of environment, you need to choose the correct plant. And if you're putting it in your living room, you need to then obviously, like there are many aspects of choosing the right type of green inside, and also matching what is there existing. Like, if you are putting like the positioning of the green, the positioning of the plants is very important, because some plants need direct sunlight, some plants don't need direct sunlight, even if they are indoors, then so many times they require direct sunlight. So the positioning, the type of plant, and obviously the amount you give them, the water, the care you give them, the kind of pots you choose for your plants, these are also very important aspects. The size of the pot, the size of the plant, they should be, we should always study. Like there are so many books, like we also, as like we architects, so many times I majorly work with urban schemes, not like really interior design. But yes, whenever we are doing even urban schemes, the type of plans we choose, you need to really study before you put it. So that is very important.
Thank you so much, Shrey.
Hi, Shrey. Yeah, I'm Sharmishta. I'm an architect myself, and I've done my master's in sustainability, so I understood most of what you said. One important question is, since I've been practicing for so long, it's what I have seen personally is often sustainability and landscape architecture, they take a back seat, as in they are treated as additions, later on additions, so they are not topics which are involved right from design stage. This is what
Yes.
I have seen most of the times. So any projects, I mean, this one was, I mean, you should become a professor. The way you explained, I felt I was sitting in one of my design classes. You better think
Thank you
about
so
that.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And any other projects? I mean, do you see a difference in practice in India and where you're practicing currently? Do you, the way we take on projects related to these fields specifically?
Okay, so definitely there is a huge difference, ma'am. Like the first difference is what you said. It is never treated as a secondary aspect here. It is always treated as a primary aspect. You know, even when you explain to the client, say, according to me, all the architects and we all designers, let's say, not just architects, should be really not forcing, but we should always keep it as a priority, that even when we are explaining to our clients, we need to explain them what you just said, never treat it as a secondary, but then you need to explain them as to why they should consider it to be a primary aspect. If you explain them that what I just said about flexibility and modularity, for example, if you explain them what it can give you in the long run, how it can give you, what profit it can give you. But because, to be very honest, the real estate world works on the you know it very well, if you are, if you are practicing since a lot of time. But what I'm trying to say is that, ma'am, you need to explain the person as to what is the profit, how it's going to provide you, and how it's going to provide other people, what it is going to provide the people with, let's say. So if you are able to, because, and you also have to be a bit adamant on your idea, you have to be very, you have to push it in front of them, because so many times the client will say, oh, I don't need this because it is a waste of space for me, or it is a waste of money for me. But if you are really strong with your idea and you push it to a point, but obviously, to be strong with the idea, first you need to convince yourself that, okay, I am going with this idea because it is going to provide the user or the client with this aspect, whatever the X aspect is. So for example, flexibility and modularity, to not take it very long, but to just cut it short, if you are able to explain that flexibility and modularity can also affect your, let's say, the money aspect, that if you make flexible and modular spaces, even if you are making 200 kitchen sets in one residential apartment, and all 200 will be the same, so your cost of production will be less. So the person will start to understand what is the real reason of this flexible and your modular thinking, let's say, in spaces. So if you are telling them that the wastage will be less, so you will save on the money if you provide the people with this kind of thing, and it will be very sustainable as a model. So the people and the client will definitely accept it, according to me, if you push the idea as a primary idea and never keep it as a secondary idea. So that's what I could say from my side.
Yes, yes, true. Right. Yeah, but what happens is in the long run to get the project, you often,
No, I
I hope
agree,
you
ma'am.
understand. Yeah.
No, I agree, but still I would say we as designers should push it, because this is the right time. Now we have seen what is happening with COVID.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
We as designers have to push the line and go for it. That's what I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Responsible. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for the
Thank
question,
you.
ma'am.
Thank you for the.
Anybody else has any question?
Hello, Shrey. Yeah.
Hello, ma'am.
Uh, not a question, but I really like this whole concept of, balcony and all. I am always fascinated because I probably am the old school, and having a balcony means a lot.
Yeah.
Having space to, fulfill your hobbies, and that's what we when we're trying to tell students also. It's not about just putting a bed and a wardrobe and something. It's also, as you say, difference between staying and living. So
Yes.
living requires much more than just staying in a place. So it
Yes.
was a wonderful project that you
Thank you, ma'am.
presented.
Thank you
That's
so
what I
much.
want to just compliment you on that. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. That's really nice of you.
Uh, I think questions are a little difficult to come here because this is a much younger crowd, and you're much advanced in your planning and designing process. So that's fine. Let them absorb. There are a lot of
Yes.
drawings that they are looking at. I'm sure all of them have learned something about the dynamics of flexibility. That's what we teach them.
Yes.
It starts with the structure, and it starts with your whole design process. So there are a lot of students here presently, and I'm sure they've understood. Only that the architectural drawings are a little difficult to absorb in first go.
Yes,
So good you
definitely, ma'am.
supplemented with a lot of renders. That was
Yes, so
nice.
that it's more
Yeah,
lively for everyone to understand the spaces now. So
right. So well done. Very nice.
thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. There is something.
Yeah. Elton has something to say. Elton, you can part. Hello, Elton is
Yes,
helping
I
with
would.
our technical thing.
Yes,
Yes,
I
Elton,
just saw.
please.
I just saw the Russian project seem to have trees on and in the buildings. Are those trees supposed to be those that were displayed by the project? Or would they? No, they are like, this was a concept. So the second phase, the, like, let's say the execution phase would take care of all the details of the project that are specifying what kind of species we are going to use, whether it is indoors or outdoors. Obviously, our idea when we provided was, we are providing with native species, not alien species. So the native, what is around, we wanted to go with those, like for example, which you saw in the, but yeah, more or less the graphical representations represent what is the existing idea. The idea was, for example, in the courtyard we put like birch trees. Why? Because birch is something, it's a native species of Russia. So that is why we tried from our side, even in the conceptual stage, to always go for things which were present in the original context. And then, but still, I can just answer to you in this way, that the kind of species we still would require an expert, let's say a proper landscape architect, who will go in detail for this to provide us with the answers. So I really hope I answered your question, Elton, and thank you so much for it.
One more question. I told you I'll ask you a lot of questions here.
Yes, ma'am,
Yeah.
definitely.
So when you had provided the balconies with the glass and everything, so you said summer
Yes.
you need to keep it open and winter you close it. So
Yes.
does the whatever material you have used here, does it sustain through
Yes.
the freezing winters of Russia? Russia
Yes,
is pretty
ma'am.
cold.
Yes, definitely. Because our idea, what our idea was to seal, whatever is like glass is not a problem, because because we did a research in the typology of glass that we could use that could sustain all the different kinds of snow and these kind of things. But yeah, but the idea of transparency was very important. That is why we chose glass, and we did a lot of research on the type of glass. But the idea what I said of this transparent space, because so many of the apartments, ma'am, in this complex that we designed were very small, were because of the low income groups, no. So if you put on parapets and you put on things which are not transparent, no, the space starts to become smaller and smaller. So even this idea, we wanted to we this was a major point of discussion, ma'am. It's a very interesting question, because the same thing we discussed so many times as to glass, whether it will be sustaining. But then we spoke with the experts of it, and they were saying yes, it can definitely sustain. It's not a problem if you really want to go ahead with your concept of transparency in the interiors and exteriors and provide the people with these beautiful views. Then we can definitely provide you with glasses, because and we can save on the money by providing these flexible and modular grids, so that it's a repetitive thing, so that cost we cut the cost in other things in order to provide the people with this solution, let's say this transparent solution. So save money in one thing and invest in the other to balance out the thing. So this was the idea, ma'am.
So most of it is prefab, then the components
Prefab.
that you put together. Yeah.
Entirely prefab, ma'am. Entirely prefabricated, and that's what, like, if you see, it was repetitive. The scheme was completely repetitive, but still I hope that all of us saw the thing that we saw we saw it, as a dynamic solution to the repetitiveness, let's say. So we repeated the module, but still we wanted a scheme that is not super a bit boring, let's say. It should have this kind of vibrance to it, no, because of a living space, and it's very important. So yes, there's some other.
And I think in Mumbai, a complex like that would cost a bomb.
Mumbai, the prices looking, ma'am.
In India, it would. Yeah.
There is a question looking at the concept of flexible design. What is your advice to real estate development in India? Any major changes in engineering design? So, like, this is I thank you, Sharinder, for the question. So looking at the concept of flexible design, what is your advice to real estate development? So this is my advice. Like I said, any space, any building, any living space you are creating as designers in the real estate world, never created with a very fixed approach. Always create. And also, like we said about this modularity, if you study your module in a way that it can be really flexible, so it will really give you a very interesting real estate, like it will answer to very interesting real estate questions, like saving money. You can, like ma'am said, like in Mumbai, the prices of the properties are very, very high. But the thing is that if you come up with a solution that can at least save on all your costs of building, then you can also sell it to the people on a right price. So this can really help all these major changes in engineering design. It will really, really lighten your structure. If you come up with a very flexible and modular design, it will save on all your costs in terms of your construction, the kind of the loads that the beams and the columns will take, the kind of structure that you are going to come up with. Or not just this, there are a few aspects that I did not touch before because they were very technical. But for example, when you're designing a very modular thing, it also helps in the parking of the area, which what I mean by parking is it's one concept, but it's very important in a country like India. We always have this problem of parking. So all this flexible and modularity can give you a very, very a highly efficient model. So what it does is it saves on not just the money, but it also gives you higher efficiency. More number of people can park, more number of things you can accommodate in your complex. So even if you have smaller spaces, okay, there's the first project was a very huge space and it was completely open. But like in a context like Mumbai, when you have smaller spaces, you need according to me, you need a very highly efficient design. And this modularity and flexibility can really provide you with these solutions that these days, architects and designers are trying to find for the real estate and obviously for the people at the end, which are the users. So I hope I answered your question. Thank you so much, Shalinder.
Thank you, Shrey. So before we move ahead, we can take rest of the questions at the end. And I, on behalf of the entire SVT Parivar, I would like to thank you, Shrey, for taking out time and sharing your experiences with us. The session was very informative and engaging. It indeed had industry insights. It presented the participants with the opportunity of learning about flexibility and modularity in living spaces at a global scale. It also helped in understanding the development of architecture and landscape with respect to social and lifestyle mixes. And as you rightly said, these three important words are very important. Accept your opportunities, evaluate them, and choose what you want. I'm sure that the learning from this session has enlightened the participants, especially our students, in their future endeavors. We hope for a long and continued association with you, Shrey. Now, I would request Sharmishta ma'am to please take over the session and kindly introduce our next guest for today. Thank you. Thank you once again, Shrey.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, hi. It's almost evening now. Good evening, all. I'm Sharmishta Devarkar, presenting the second speaker of the day. So we have a traveler and a photographer by profession who perceives design as an interdisciplinary and collective effort to respond to contemporary needs and future issues. We have architect Mayank Shekhawat. Having completed his bachelor's in 2016 from GGSIP University in New Delhi, Mayank has further pursued a master's in sustainable architecture and landscape design from Politecnico di Milano in Milan, that's Italy. Adding to his accolades is another master's in urban design and housing from McGill University in Montreal, Canada. His achievements comprise of an Alvaro Ortega Award for low-cost housing and the Cornelia and Peter Overlander Prize in Urban Design. Mayank is also a lead professional and a winner of a lighting installation competition held in Gurgaon and a winner of the charrette involving revitalization of the McGill College Avenue in Montreal. Currently working for New Architects in Montreal, Canada, he also has gained experience from numerous firms, namely Tulip Infratech Gurgaon, Delhi Development Authority, Rajiv Agarwal Architects Delhi, and Studio Joan Paul Italy. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Mayank. Over to you.
Good morning. So sorry. Good evening, everyone. It's still morning. That's why I was saying good morning. Thank you firstly for the introduction. Good morning, Chetna. So well, firstly, I'd like to say thank you to the
Mayank, and welcome.
Oh, thank you. I would firstly like to say thank you to the Department of Resource Management for organizing this webinar. I mean, and just know that I'm very grateful to be a part of this. I think it's a great initiative for students as to learn more from different disciplines, from architects, from landscape designers, from interior designers, because especially in times of today's, I think all these disciplines, along with many others, come together to sort of make a project happen, to make a project successful. And also very, very thank you to everybody who's here and taken our time to be a part of this webinar. I'll start by talking a little bit about myself. My name is Mayank Shekhawat. I'm from New Delhi, and I'm presently working as a graduate architect at Architect Montreal in Canada. It's a multidisciplinary firm that works in architecture, urban design, and interior design. I'm also a lead accredited professional in building design and construction. So part of my job also is to work towards making a project as sustainable as possible. And the way I first became interested in, this is very general, but the way I first became interested in architecture was the idea of it sort of working at the edge of a lot of different professions. So it was somewhere a part of engineering, somewhere a part of interior design, somewhere architecture itself, yes, and then designing, which I felt was great. And that's what sort of stemmed the interest in architecture in me altogether in the very beginning. I will just share my screen. And I cannot see the, okay, it's right here. I'm so sorry, I'm trying to reach, yes, the full screen mode. Okay, so the way I've structured today's presentation is to discuss with you my journey as an architect and as an urban designer. So I'll start with a project which I did as part of my bachelor's program in Sushant School of Art and Architecture in New Delhi. I'll move on to a landscape project which I did as part of my master's program at Politecnico di Milano in Italy. And finally, I'll discuss a mixed use project which I've worked on in my present office. In each of these, I'll try to discuss elements that firstly interest me, and secondly that define the work that I presently do. So in each of these projects, I'll try to bring out one strategy that we can discuss probably. A strategy discussing sustainability in architecture. I'll try to keep these strategies generic, so it's not that if I'm discussing one strategy on a landscape project or on a macro level, it can very well be applied to a very interior design or to a very micro level as well. So just remember that when we talk about sustainability in any field, it's the effort and it's the thought that counts. Because the moment you make sure of achieving something, I'm sure you will find a way of doing it. So I mean, I will try to keep these strategies and the ideas sort of generic and altogether. So I'll start with my bachelor's thesis, where I designed the embassy of Bahrain in New Delhi, India. As we know that embassies are very high security zones. And at that time, I felt that because of these security reasons, the building typology had regressed from a diplomatic center to an imposing fortress. Simply put, इंसान को अंदर जाने से डर लगेगा. And so the aim of my thesis was to work on a typology that creates a balance between these security concerns and the openness of the building. Again, simply put, इंसान को अंदर जाने से डर ना लगे. Now, at that time, the project also seemed very interesting to me because it provided me the opportunity to sort of study a different context, study a different architecture, and adapt it to the Indian context in New Delhi. And the issue that I'll probably try to highlight with this project, will be the heat island effect. It's something that always comes up at one point or the other during the project. And most of the times, it's going to come up in an indirect manner. I mean, I'm pretty sure you must have heard people saying कि top floor पे रहते हैं तो गर्मी ज़्यादा लगती है. It's a very common phenomena. And so the idea is that the temperature of cities and urban environments is higher than its surroundings. And this is primarily because our building materials, they absorb more heat than they reflect it. So that's the idea. So it's just try to wrap this around your head. It's called the heat island effect. It's a very simple phenomena. But what we fail to understand is that this phenomena can actually make a difference of 4 to 8 degrees Celsius in the temperature that we feel. So, I mean, I believe, especially in the Indian context, it's something that we should specifically think about. So in this project, I used simple strategies to counter this phenomena. Very easy ones. It's probably something that would really quickly come to your mind. For example, like placing most parking underground. This would give us the opportunity to have more green space on top. All the pathways that were designed as part of this project were kept permeable. So I'm sure you must have seen pavements and footpaths around in Mumbai, where you see half stone and half of the ground which is visible. So the idea is that you let the water go inside, you let the sun go inside. You don't create an entirely hard surface. Then the roofs for the entire project here that I'm showing you, the roofs, they were all made of light colored cement tiles to reflect sunlight as much as possible. And this is something which automatically keeps the building cool. I worked with a courtyard typology here, and I designed all the buildings, all the different functions that were to be placed in the embassy around these courtyards. So the natural ventilation would keep the building appropriately warm and appropriately cool in the respective months. So as you can see here, this was the main entrance of the project. And above that, you could see probably these concept diagrams where you can understand the idea of how I created these courtyards and how I segmented the site to incorporate different functions. I tried to reuse the rainwater and introduce water channels in the courtyard as well. And this was something which would help in evaporative cooling. Again, a very simple and a very cheap strategy. And what we have to understand here is that as designers, there will be times when these strategies will come in handy. You just have to think about it and apply them. Now, for example, tomorrow you could be working for a client who wants you to design as simple as a small terrace. And some people like to have a fancy bar. Some people like to have a small sitting on their roof. I mean, just think about these strategies, very easy ones, very quick ones, make it green, have a small garden there. I mean, instead of using expensive tiles that would be burning hot in the summer, use materials that would deflect most of the solar height, like solar light, materials with very high solar reflectance. Try to add pergolas. That's something that would automatically shade your roof and would be aesthetically pleasing as well. And try to make use of rainwater. That's something that comes in handy in India. And trust me, the very moment you start exploring, you will start getting answers on how to make the buildings or even products more green. So it was during this project, during my bachelor's thesis, that I sort of realized my inclination towards sustainability. And shortly after, I moved to Italy to study sustainable architecture and landscape design. It was a 2-year Master of Science program, and it helped me focus my interests on much larger scale projects. And I won't really talk about I won't talk much about the whole experience of going out and everything, because I know Sushma yesterday spoke about that a lot, and even Shrey mentioned about his experiences. But at this point, I would really like to mention the best 2 years of my life. I learned so much, both about architecture and about myself. It was actually the first time I was living away from home, and it really helped me in taking control of things and in making decisions more independently. So yeah, but I'm pretty sure, I mean, the other speakers have mentioned about this a lot, so I won't go there. So the second project that I'll be looking at now, which I'll try to look at in a little more detail, would be my master's thesis, which was called Working with Wasteland. Now, once again, this project was based in New Delhi. I don't know how many of you have been to New Delhi, or how many of you have gotten the chance to enter New Delhi from the north when you're coming down from Chandigarh. So New Delhi has these massive landfills, like mountains of waste, I would say. There are 4 of these, out of which 3 had reached their maximum capacity somewhere around the early 2000s, or the late 1990s. And the surprise, or I would say, like the shocking idea is that they're still being used. So we focused on the Bhalswa landfill. This is somewhere on the north of Delhi, and this was located right next to a water channel which flows down to Yamuna. And if you ever get a chance, search for this landfill on Google Earth and look at the water channel that flows right next to it. It's black. It's not blue. It's not dark blue, but black. That's the kind of pollution and toxicity that flows out of this landfill. So we started with the urban analysis. We started studying mobility networks, water networks, green spaces, and the population density in general to understand what we really wanted to do with the site. And I believe no matter how small or how big the project is, it could be even an interior design project, or it could be simply choosing your materials for an interior design project. But I do believe a detailed analysis is always important, as it helps you make informed decisions. So now I won't go into too much details here, but eventually a park typology was decided upon based on the location and the context of the site. So we studied the slopes quite in depth. And the idea here was that we wanted to make use of the natural typology of the site. Now I'm probably slightly incorrect here when I'm saying natural typology, because it's totally artificially created. It's all waste. So so I would say, like, the artificial typology of the site that's existing, and we wanted that topography to sort of inform our design in general. So as simple as, I mean, on the plan on your left side, on the top side, you see these 3 small circles. Those were the low points in the site. So we realized with our slope analysis that that's where all the water is flowing to. So automatically you have your water space there. Like when you think of a park, you usually think of a water body, you think of some playing space, you think of some jogging or running trails. And we wanted the site to inform us where all these functions can fit in naturally, without actually making a lot of effort and making a lot of changes and making a lot of construction waste, actually. So that's what the idea of this analysis was. Now, this was our proposal for the site. A park was an obvious choice, firstly, as we wanted to reverse the changes that we had, I mean, that were done to the site, the toxic changes, and like the damages, I would say. And plants are undoubtedly the best to reverse those damages. And This I think it was more of a landscape project with incorporating very little bit of architecture and primarily looking at landscape strategies to mitigate these damages. Now, the strategy that I would focus on in this project would be source reduction. And so the idea for source reduction is just to lessen the demand for new materials. So, if you're making something new, how can you actually achieve that in the least amount of materials and the least amount of effort possible, and without actually creating a demand for new materials? Again, this is a universal strategy. It doesn't matter on the site, it doesn't matter on the project or the nature of work. It can, I mean, if you'd ask me, I'd say it can be used everywhere. Um, for example, I mean, tomorrow, if you're working on an interior design project, think about this. So instead of ordering all new materials, all new furniture, think about if there's something that you can actually use from the demolition waste. Think about probably using some local materials instead of ordering or probably purchasing expensive materials from that come from 200 miles away. Look for manufacturers. I believe there are some manufacturers that offer products made out of recycled materials, and some even offer a buyback program. So especially furniture manufacturers. I mean, so you can buy their furniture, you can use them, and at the end of their life cycle, the manufacturers will buy them back from you and pay you some small amount and probably reuse the wood in new furnitures. So try to look for these strategies in every project that you work on, be it interiors, be it landscape, be it urban design, be it architecture, because this idea of refurbishment and the idea of reuse, which eventually leads to reduction of new materials, is something that we should really look at. It's a very sustainable idea. It's profitable for the client as well. It's economically feasible. It makes the project economically more feasible. So yes, I think there are a lot of arguments that you can make around that to support this. Now in this project, whatever little architecture we did, you might see some little walls in the landscape on the diagrams at the bottom. We tried to make all of those from recycled materials. So our idea was that we did some research, and we realized that there were certain companies that could actually produce or make walls or make like literally bricks out of waste. They would take this waste from the landfill, they would compress it, obviously specific materials, and make them hard enough to act as walls or to act as bricks. And by doing this, we would naturally just using what was present on the site and reducing the demand for buying new bricks or for using concrete for bearing walls. And what you see on this slide from top to bottom is like a timeline. So it's a succession of spaces. And I mean, this idea we not only use for materials, we even try to apply the strategy to plants. So we didn't want to bring. I think this was a question raised in the previous presentation as well. We didn't want to bring in all new plants because the site didn't have any plants. It was landfill. So imagine if you have to make a park on this big a site, you have to like how many number of species of plants you will have to plant and to make that effort to actually develop it as a park. So our strategy was that we would probably, so if you see, for example, the three diagrams on the left from top to bottom, our strategy was that the top you see is what we have immediately after remediation. So immediately after we cover the landfill with soil and other membranes. The middle stage is how we do the planting. So we only plant in specific places and strategically, so that eventually as the seasons pass and as rains happen, these seeds and these pollens would flow automatically and spread around the landscape. And the final phase, which is the phase 2 of the proposal, is what you would have at the end. At least that's what our vision was. And that's how we approached it. So for example, on the right hand side from top to bottom, this was a spot in the landscape or in the landfill which was sort of like a gorge slightly. So this was a point where water was always collecting, not enough to make a water body here, but enough to sort of have tropical gardens, have plants that would really require a lot of water usage here. So this was an area that was sort of created with that idea. And along with source reduction, another strategy that we sort of focused here was to use rainwater, was to reduce the demand for drinking water or water that could potentially be used for drinking, for irrigation or for landscape purposes. And again, the strategy, because I mean, Delhi, Mumbai, Calcutta, and a lot of other Indian cities experience heavy monsoons. So why not make use of it? I mean, we never realize it, but a huge amount of water required in building goes for irrigation purposes. And just imagine how much that would be in specific landscape projects. So, I mean, what we did here, I think on the left side is a point for at the edge of the canal that I was referring to in the beginning, that flows next to the landfill area. And we wanted to develop it as a water edge. The idea was to clean the canal, to remove the toxicity and make it more enjoyable for people. On the right is the space that I was mentioning with the low point, where water automatically would collect on the side, because that's what the slope analysis showed us. And this was the area where basically we would have wetlands and species that could be incorporated in sort of a landscape like this. And again, sorry, there's one thing that I forgot to mention. Again, when you're talking about water saving strategies, once again, it's something which is general. So now here I'm talking about water saving strategies on a very macro level. I'm talking about how on a landfill site of I don't know, like probably 1,000 square meters, I'm saving water. But these very strategies can be applied to a very small project as well. So for example, tomorrow, if you're working on an office interior, you know that probably I mean, imagine if there's hypothetically, I'm talking about an office space in Gurgaon. It's a high-rise building, and it's got these washrooms which are common, which are going to be used a lot. And especially in today's times when people are washing hands like 10 times a day. So try to look for these strategies and how we can incorporate them on a micro level. What comes on the top of my mind is using fixtures like flow restrictors and flow aerators. Now, these are heavy words. They simply mean that water, like the amount of water that flows out of these fixtures, is less than the usual taps. So they have a slight fixture that fits in your tap or in your water fixtures, and that mixes air with the water. That's it. And the idea becomes that essentially the kind of the flow what you're getting per minute or per gallon is way less than what you would get otherwise. Then soon after Italy, I forgot to mention about this slide. So because I mentioned about the water channel that flows next to our site, and it's the primary reason for it being so toxic and so black was because during rainfalls, the water from inside the landfill would flow to this water channel, and eventually it would take with itself all these toxins, all these waste elements, and flow into the channel, which eventually flowed down to Yamuna. So imagine the kind of the waste flow that's happening here. So while we were thinking about what to do with the site, we also thought that even no matter how much we do, because we will remediate the top of the site, but you can never really erase what's below it, right? So the idea was that even then, when rainfall happens, and if in some areas water is able to percolate inside the ground to the landfill, when it flows down to the water channel, it should not be that toxic. So we installed these filtration walls that you see in the section at the bottom. And the idea was that as the water, even if it passes through the landfill in some areas, by the time it reaches the water channel, it should be much more cleaner without toxins than what it used to be. And right at the edge where we see these plants and everything, little steps just before the water, that's where we chose specific species which were capable of absorbing toxins from water, which would eventually lead to a much cleaner canal and a much cleaner water body right next to our site. This was a graphical representation of what we imagined it to be, and I know there it's quite high hopes with water channels in Delhi, but we have to start somewhere. We have to start making the effort somewhere. We have to start thinking about these things somewhere, because I mean, it's already too late with it, I would say, but we have to start somewhere, honestly, to be able to achieve something in the next years. In terms of architecture for this project, we did very minor interventions. It was primarily a landscape project, and the architecture was kept very minimal, very simple, and we only put it in very specific spaces for a very symbolic nature. So the idea is, when you come to this park, it's not just a recreative space, but it's also a memorial. It's a memorial to waste. So the idea behind all these small interventions was to remind the user that what they're actually enjoying right now, what they're walking on, or this massive park which you see in the city, is actually a landfill, and it's a part of it's happened, or it had become possible only because of our ill habits of the way we treat garbage or the way we manage garbage, I would say. And for example, here we see the space. If you see somewhere here at the center, we kept the wall exposed in some areas. The idea behind that was, again, to show people that these walls are made out of waste. So, I mean, we wanted people to have a good time here. We want people to enjoy the park, have a very beautiful looking recreational space. But at the same time, we wanted to have these elements as part of our trails or as part of the landscape that would remind you of the negativity of that site. It never goes. It will always be there, no matter how much we try to remediate that. Then after my master's, that was a physical model of the project that we had worked on. And now after my master's, I started working at Noof Architects, where I'm working still, and I moved to Montreal. And I started pursuing, sorry, I didn't start with Noof Architect. I moved to Montreal and started pursuing Masters of Architecture in Urban Design and Housing at McGill University. So it was a one-year program, and it was more of a research-based program and than have a lot of studio work. So we were not doing a lot of designing at McGill. We were mostly doing research, and eventually we had to sort of work on an individual research report. So the idea behind choosing this master's was because, so after my 2 years in Italy, I had already become sort of interested in sustainability and projects on a much larger scale. So almost touching the urban scale. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to work immediately after that, or if I wanted to pursue a PhD, or I was slightly confused, and I was slightly somewhere in the middle of what to do with it. So this was a one-year program, which offered me the idea that if I want to pursue, I can actually continue it as a PhD, and otherwise I could do a master's in 1 year, finish my thesis, finish my research report, and then be done with it. So my thesis at McGill focused on a project again in India. It was architect P.V. Doshi's iconic project. It's called the Upadhyaya Housing. My research was a post-occupancy study, and it explored the growth of this project. And sorry, I'm briefly talking about this, even though I don't have a slide on it, because I just realized it's something very interesting, and it's something it also relates to something what Shrey talked about before this in his presentation. So I know we were discussing about resources and about modularity and about flexibility in the presentation before. So I would say Upadhyaya Housing is a beautiful example of that. It was meant for the economically weaker section people, so for the poorest of the poor, and they were just given a small portion of land along with the toilet fixture. That's it. And so the modularity here, and sorry, the flexibility here comes with the idea that those people, they will build their own homes themselves as and when they have the resources. So some might have a one-story home in 1 year. Some might have a one-story home in 3 years. Some might just be living in a small kacha settlement. Some people might have a 3-story within the next 5 years if they were able to make, or if they were able to gather enough resources. I believe the project was simply amazing. And I was surprised that this project was never discussed so much in India. At least during my bachelor's, it wasn't as much as I believe it should have. It was called the Upadhyaya Housing. So yeah, after my master's here at McGill, I started working at Noof Architects, where I'm working still. And so as part of my office work, I worked on this very interesting project. It was located in downtown Montreal. It was located somewhere at the intersection of the business district and the residential neighborhood. And so the idea here was to sort of cater to both of these different contexts carefully, because I mean, people here, I know I would talk a little bit about the context here, because people see downtown as a very business center. I mean, you have these high-rise buildings, and you have these industries, and this site was close to the water, where you have a lot of factories as well. And on one side, where you see a lot of trees in this section right here, were a lot of residential, smaller buildings, 3 stories, 4 stories, so an entirely residential neighborhood. So we wanted to site the project and have the program in a manner that would cater to both of these different kinds of populations and different kinds of needs. So the first idea was that we tried to keep the design as open and as permeable as possible. People could walk through it. It was open. It was not barricaded at any point. So it was more like an openness and yeah, like an open field to the landscape. And The landscape was also carefully looked at to cater to the physically challenged. So we worked with levels and we carefully, because the site was actually sloping, and we carefully modeled the levels so that it was accessible throughout for the physically challenged, and also had bike paths going along with it. So we worked on sort of on 3 different buildings here, and the idea was to work on a live, work, and play concept. Now, this is again something that you would, I think when Shrey talked about co-working, co-living spaces, he was talking about a lot of different generations and a lot of different types of people. And the idea here was the same. So the idea was to was to create a mix of programs, create a mix of functions and users that would allow people of very different backgrounds and very different requirements to live together and create this dynamic mix in the project. So for example, and there were 3 buildings. They were supposed to be done in 3 different phases. We were focusing on this one right here, which has the colored plans. So all 3 buildings had commercial in the ground floor always. And this building, which was the first phase, was entirely residential. The second building right here had 4 floors of school and then residential on top. And then the third building here had 5 floors of office space and then residential again on top. So you see with these different functions, or with these different programs of having an office space, it caters to a different set of people. Having a school caters to families, to again a different set of people. And then this building was meant to be just rental. So the top one wouldn't be selling apartments. It was just rental spaces. So again, this caters to a different type of people altogether. And yeah. So for these buildings, we also worked on the ground floors. For example, in this one, if you see these areas where you have black metal, the idea was to have a commercial or an office space at the bottom, and then have the house connected to like kind of inside from it. So again, this gives you a much larger space. This also gives you a sort of sense like a modularity. So you might not want to have it entirely commercial at the bottom. You can just have half commercial and keep the half residential if you need more rooms. So we try to keep those ideas as part of our design, because we knew that we were kind of, we were aiming for a very different mix of people, and we knew that they would have different requirements. So we wanted to cater to that flexibility as well. And the mixed use typology was sort of, it was developed to attract a variety of residents and in turn create a very dynamic mix of people. Now, again, very, very simple strategies we used here, but I personally really like this project because we had the option here of really exploiting the site in terms of sustainable strategies. And it's primarily because, I know this question was raised in the presentation before mine, that sometimes sustainability and landscape and things like these, they take a backseat when we're working on projects. So I would like to answer with that if at times we see we should actually search for programs or get in touch with governments or municipalities. And sometimes you can actually get benefits in different ways. So for example, I know in Canada, at least here, if you prove that your building is working, is very efficient and from a sustainability standpoint, it's working very well, and it's something that's positively contributing to the society without actually having a very big negative impact on the environment. Sometimes you get tax benefits. Sometimes so in this case for us, we got a height benefit. We were able to build slightly higher than what's permitted in the area. So sometimes there are incentives like these that you as architects or as designers, you can search for these. You can try to manage to get that for the client, and in turn make sustainability and landscape a very important part of your project. And that's what happened here. So we were able to do that because we were giving something to the city, and in turn the city was giving us something. So that's why landscape and sustainability became important elements of this project. And so, simple strategies we used, again, not very how do you say, something very easy to understand. Again, there were permeable pathways, so we kept minimum hardscapes. Mostly they were landscaped areas or unbound walkways, so water could go down. Your rainwater was always going to the ground. It was refreshing the water cycle below. We had green spaces on rooftops, so that again the heat island effect I talked about, that can be mitigated, because this way you don't really have much of the hard surface that would reflect the heat. So we had green spaces on the rooftop as well, and then we had provided for personal food gardens for selective environments, for selective apartments. Because as I told you, we were the idea was to cater to a different mix of people. So sometimes we were thinking of families that would want to have their own small garden. Sometimes we were thinking of with students who would probably, honestly, if we about it, not care about growing their own stuff that much, because sometimes they're only here for a semester. Sometimes you're thinking of people that might be interested, might not be interested. So we could have a food garden for them on the roof, and if they want a space for it, you could apply for it to the building management, get yourself a space, and then have your own small food garden. Then water reuse again was thought of as an important strategy here, and like I said, we try to keep it mostly permeable, so rainwater could be managed. Whatever water would fall on the roof, it would be managed again for irrigation purposes for the site, because you see there's a lot of landscape, so you don't want to use water like potable water for irrigation purposes. At the same time, we carefully selected species in landscape that would require a lot less water. But the idea was whatever water they still require. I mean, we could just use rainwater from it, and also snow. There's plenty of it in Canada. And the way we had placed the building, so we did an in-depth sun study, and we came up with this idea of placing these buildings like this to make them mostly south facing, because this is something that we don't do in India. I think we prefer not facing buildings, so it's less hot. But here, I think we want to gain maximum sunlight from the winter sun. And we also worked on very, very efficient wall and roof assemblies to keep the building well insulated. Again, this thing came up in the last presentation of glass. And glass was also an option for these buildings, but we realized that in this context, it was proving to be a little more expensive. Not in terms of the installation, but in terms of the long run, because the functioning costs of the building were going high. So we try to develop these roof assemblies with thick insulation, and same with wall assemblies, so that automatically your heating and cooling costs during all months would sort of go down. And it was something that was difficult to convince the client, but when you actually give them statistics and numbers as to how much difference the project can make over the next 5 years, if this is what we use, then it's something that they sort of become open to. So a detailed, how do you say, construction and demolition waste management plan was also created for this project, because something that we don't realize as much is that in the landfills and in the waste that's generated by any country, construction and demolition waste actually, how do you say, accounts for most of that percentage. It has the largest percentage. And if you see at a site when demolition is happening or when construction is happening, most of the materials that we found can be reused. They can easily be diverted from being sent to a landfill. And so that was the idea here. We wanted to, at least our aim was, because there was already an existing building on the site, our aim was to use at least 75% to 80% of all the existing materials. And the same for during the construction. We tried to go for prefabrication and modularity, so that we don't really create a lot of waste on site while the construction is happening. The project, again, just like, so we tried to have a gym, a pool, a grocery store, and like a common space, a common working space, and a playground as well for children. And all these spaces were thought of so that, people don't have to take out their vehicles. They don't have to travel a distance to go use these spaces. And what was also thought about in this project, because we had an office, we had a school, was joint use of facilities. So for example, a school might already have a theater room, it might already have a small auditorium. Similarly, the office space might have conference rooms, and these spaces can actually be used by the residents in off hours. So automatically the need for these spaces within the surroundings goes down. I mean, nobody wants to create a new theater when there's already an existing one. Nobody wants to think about an auditorium when it's right there. You just need to have the means of using it. So the idea of having the school and office were also these, that during off hours, some of these spaces could have a joint use function and could actually be used by the residents as well. Now, along with that, in terms of the parking, because I just mentioned about the vehicle use, something we did here was we actually gave less parking than the number of the units we gave here. So the idea was because we realized that the site was closer to a metro station, the site was closer to bike paths, and we were already providing a lot of functions right here. And it was also the bus stop was right at the edge of the site. So the idea here, what we did was we actually gave almost half the parking for. So the coefficient was somewhere 0.5. It was, if there are like 500 units, we gave 250 parking spots all in the ground. So the idea here was that if you have less spots, you automatically have less of a need to purchase a car and use it, because you have the metro, you have the bikes, you have the buses, you have all public transport available right here. You have all the functions in walking distance. Your site is accessible, your site is walkable. So then make use of it instead of buying a car and unnecessarily using it. So we did that, and also with whatever parking we provided, we actually gave a lot of charging stations as well for electric vehicles, because it's something that people are shifting to now, especially with how famous Tesla is becoming. People are starting to use electric vehicles, and it's getting a new trend now. People are starting looking at like as electric vehicles as fancier vehicles. So I know here, I mean, people sort of fancy an electric vehicle more than a Mercedes. So it's something that's of a growing trend, and we wanted to cater to that as well. And then I think I honestly, one thing which I really liked about this project was that we didn't only try to aim for architectural sustainability. It was not just that we were working with strategies that could only be used in architecture. We were working with strategies that were at the same time can be used, like were being used in the landscape. For the interiors, like I mentioned, we were trying to play with modularity and flexibility, so that, for example, if a person, I mean, because you have different businesses, I mean, imagine tomorrow if I have a very small architecture office, I'll probably require just two people. If you have a real estate office, again, maybe two people, three people. If you have some other different kind of office, you might require the entire floor or the entire space of your apartment. So that's how we were trying to, we were really ignoring, we weren't really installing any of the interior walls in the office spaces. We were just giving the basic staircases and the services. And based on the client's needs, or based on the person who buys the apartment or rents it, we will do the building inside. So this way, automatically, you don't build something and demolish it again. You're directly catering to somebody's needs. You don't unnecessarily provide them something. Instead, they will tell you what they need, and then in that case you will provide it to them. So automatically your waste goes down, your effort and your changes that would happen to the building, they go down. And I believe this project, it really worked well on the idea of not just architectural sustainability but also social sustainability, because of this whole different mix of people that we were looking at, this mix of people that we were trying to create in this site at the edge of the business district. I really thought it was something which was socially sustainable. It was something which was meant for the people. We wanted to have it. We wanted to have a dynamic mix, and we wanted to have functions that would cater to those dynamic mix. And I think it's at the end of the day, I mean, all of our projects, be it interior design, be it landscape, be it architecture, they're all meant for people. So they should, at the end of it, be satisfied with the work that we're doing for them, and it should be something that they sort of, their requirements should define our work rather than vice versa. That's what something I would believe. And I don't know how long I have left now, but I believe I've reached somewhere at the end of my presentation after continuously speaking for a while. Yeah, I have. So I think we can actually make it more of a discussion based after this, because I would really be glad to answer your questions, or maybe have discussions about the idea of sustainability in architecture, or in landscape as well. And if there's anything else that I can help you with.
I have a lot of questions for you, Mayank.
I'm just trying to turn on the video. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, perfect.
yeah. Sharmishta here.
Hi, Sham.
Yeah, what you spoke about right now, that where you're practicing right now, if
Mhm,
you come up with a green design or whatever it is,
mhm,
design, you get tax benefits, right?
mhm.
So
Yeah.
something like that needs to be worked out from, in a country like India. So
Mhm,
here it's more like, it's your personal business whether you want to go
mhm.
green or not.
Yeah.
And since you've done your lead AP,
Mhm,
I think, how do you approach projects now? I mean, is it during the design process right from scratch, or you kind of address to buildings which are already constructed existing and then make them green?
No, so honestly, that's something that depends on the project and the site and the client. Because if sometimes we work with projects where the building is already existing and we have to refurbish it. I know one of such projects that's coming up now for in our offices. There's an existing commercial space. It's a 3-story commercial space, and there's supposed to be an addition of residential space on top of it. So we approach it like that. We and when I talk about sustainability, I talk about it in a variety of senses. So we for this particular project, we'll try to have heritage sustainability as well. So we'll try to conserve whatever is there on the site in terms of the building inside. In fact, we are also trying to conserve the interior walls, and then just have the addition in a manner so that there's least amount of disruption to what's already existing. Then what you said about the tax benefit for India, that's something that I agree with, but that's just one element of it. Sometimes you might see that you can take different sorts of benefits from the municipality. It's something that you will, I mean, I haven't really worked that long in India. So it's something that really have to check it out there, research that, because here as well, it's not something which is direct. They won't really say you that if you're doing this, we're going to give you this. It's not working like that here as well. It's something that you, for example, we tell them that this is what our idea is, this is what we're, because for example, having a school is a positive impact on the site, on the neighborhood as well. But at the same time, for the client, having a school is not very profitable, so they would rather have it entirely residential, sell off the condos, and
Mixed
then
use, the way you just showed
exactly.
us.
Exactly. And this way, then we try to convince the city here that we're doing something for the neighborhood, something for the people, and we're trying to make it all sustainable. So it's something which is also good for the environment. And in our efforts to do so, we're actually losing a lot of time, we're losing a lot of money. So what is it that we can gain back from it? So it becomes a two-way process. And sometimes they give you tax benefits, sometimes they give you height benefits, sometimes they
So
give
like an
you
extra FSI or something.
exactly, yes, exactly. So and these are things which depend honestly from every site and every project. It works differently because it's something that we're arguing with them, we're debating with them. It might happen, it might not happen. Mostly it happens, but in different ways. Sometimes it's tax benefits, sometimes it's height, sometimes it's flow area ratios. So it happens in different ways. But if we really pursue it, it's something that it's something that we can gain back from them. And for the part of the clients, like you said, what we try to do is we really try to argue with them with numbers. So if we tell them, for example, there was one point when I mentioned about flow restrictors and flow aerators. These are just slightly more expensive taps than your normal taps or normal fixtures, and reduce the amount of water coming out from it. Automatically, if you tell somebody that instead of buying hypothetically a 100 rupee tap, buy a 150 rupee tap, when you apply that to a 500 apartment building or an office building, it's a lot of money. So we usually try to play with numbers to tell them that if this is what you're paying more in the next 5 years, this is how much you will be saving when the water
In the
is
long run.
in
Yeah.
the long run. And then in this conversation, you really, I mean, that's what at least I've seen from my experience. You really have to bring numbers. You have to convince them that it's not something that you're talking in the air. It's not something that you're saying is might happen, might not happen. It's something that you're sure of. It's something that you can guarantee, and it's something that you're working towards. And I think once they start wrapping their head around with those numbers and with seeing that it's more upfront, but probably you can gain back a lot from it eventually. It's something that they become more open to.
Yeah. Is it the same with that wasteland project that you did? I mean, how did you go about getting that project?
So the Wasteland project was actually my thesis project in Polytechnico di Milano, in
Oh,
Italy. So it was me and another friend of mine, Pat. We had worked on the project together, and it was something that we were proposing. It's not something that we were getting it. And I know I know it's being converted to a park, the Bhalswa landfill. There have been talks, there have been competitions, but they haven't yet come out with a final proposal for it yet. But while we were doing this project, we were looking for different ideas, and we did see that they were coming up with this idea for the project. So that's how we got the idea of having doing the project. But it's not a project that we got, I would say.
okay.
Mm.
And since I teach landscape in SVT, could you
Mhm.
just brief students as to, how do you start with designing landscape? Usually
Mhm.
the projects we give them are more, since they're interior design students, we want them to understand landscape more as an isolated, subject as to since they have it only for a semester. So
I understand.
yeah. So when you start designing landscape, like I asked Shrey also, like how do you start from scratch? Is it something like after the built form has been designed, you start whatever is left over is landscape, or is it an inbuilt thing? I mean, it goes hand in hand with the design, building design.
So, I mean, it depends. I mean, if your project is slightly more inclined towards the landscape side, then you start with the landscape. And if it's an architectural project, then landscape is something that follows. But I would say it follows it at a relatively early stage. So, for example, in the Balsa project I showed, we really when I'm working with landscapes, at least I'm talking about myself when I'm working with landscapes, instead of applying different concepts on the site, saying that this is what I believe it should be and making it happen, I really do an in-depth analysis of the site itself, of the neighborhood, of the climatic conditions, of what kind of plants would thrive in that region and what kind of would be beneficial for the ground itself, for the site itself. And I go with the idea that I would let the site sort of inform me in my design rather than choosing the other way around. So even for the Balsra project, we were we did an entire topography study, and all the different spaces we had a water body, we had a tropical garden, we had a playground sort of a scenario. Everything was actually came out from the topography of the site doing the slope analysis. Things came out from understanding how the land is working, how the nature of landscape would act eventually or work eventually with changing seasons, and that's how we sort of got informed. And while doing that, while trying to see what is it that we're trying to achieve, we started putting in these strategies for landscape designs. Like those stepped landscapes came from a certain idea of saving the number of species and of using the natural slope to actually have a natural irrigation happen on site. So we let these side features define our landscape. For the final project which I showed, landscape happened later, but not very late. So the first idea was to actually understand how the buildings would sit on the site and how they would be the most efficient in terms of having a sun study, having an energy analysis done, and how it would be the best, what would be the best possible orientation for those buildings after all these analysis. The moment we had the basic shapes or basic locations of the buildings, we brought the landscape architect in and they took care of it. And then we started sharing or coordinating from the very preliminary stage when our buildings we were trying to understand where the entrances would be of the building. That's when the landscape architects had already started researching what kind of plants would be the best for the site, what kind of concepts like for accessibility we're aiming for, because it was a sloping site and we wanted to make it accessible for everybody. So the landscape architect and us, like as architects, we were sort of working together from a very early stage, coordinating quite regularly. Even at every point, our building entrances would change. They would make the change to the landscape. It was a very back and forth process, and it was something that we really looked at, because in this specific project, the site was kept open. There were no railings, there were no barricades, there were no boundary walls. It was like a free flowing space, and you could go inside, you could move outside. So landscape was an important part of it, and we tried to bring it in the very early stages, I would say. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you for your reply. There's a question which has come in. Could you explain what are bio walls and the concept of bio walls?
Second, I'm trying to.
There's a question which has come in from
Can
Chetna
you
ma'am.
throw light on the concept of bio walls? So, if I'm not mistaken, I would just like to clarify here. Bio walls. Are you referring to? Because I know we have this certain area of architecture that's called bioarchitecture, where the idea is to use to not use a lot of additional or like artificial materials and chemicals when the construction is happening, and try to use the natural materials with joineries and with techniques where basically like your joints would not, because for example in steel we weld it, sometimes we do these additions to it. And then bioarchitecture refers to the idea where we do these joineries and we do these details in a very I would say natural manner, like something that sort of interlocks. So instead of really using additional substances to make your construction happen, you try to use the very natural how do you say, properties of the material that we're using for the building, and you try to make these construction happen with these materials. And I would say it's more sensitive to what the materials are, and I believe it's much more sustainable than a regular building for sure. But I would say it's something that that works well on smaller scale projects. But I mean, I personally haven't ever worked on a bio building, I haven't personally applied bio architecture to a very large scale project because it becomes slightly difficult when we're calculating loads and when we're trying to see how the building is structured. But for small scale projects, it's something that would really work well. And this is all if that's what Chetna was referring to, because then otherwise the bio walls also
This is one, this is the type of project that we had given. We have a subject that is industrial visit. And so we had some kind of projects given to our students, assignments. And I believe one group had taken up bio walls. I think there's one student here. Alan is here. Alan Rongi, can you just unmute yourself and I don't know whether you can allow her to talk. So it was related to bio-walls. So what my perception was, bionic architecture and bio-walls are two different things. So that's how we have been perceiving it. But I wanted more clarification. Is it something to do with vertical landscaping, or what is it really?
So that's what I was getting at, because then the other idea of bio walls would be like living walls.
Interlocking, sorry.
No, because I mean that's what I was confused about, because bio walls could also be referring to bio architecture that I just explained about, and the other way of going it is the living landscape walls that you're referring to, and that is again something that we're using in one of our projects. And am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, sorry. I think there was just everybody went on mute together, so I wasn't able to listen, and I thought probably something's wrong with my internet. Yeah, and then the other way of looking at it is the living walls, is the bio walls, which are basically vertical landscaped walls. And again, the idea for that is I would personally say when we're using bio walls, the idea should be to understand how feasible they are for that building and for that climate and for that landscape. Because I know sometimes I see in downtown Montreal here that there are these buildings that use bio walls, but then they make it's sort of forced, because now they have come up with these very special techniques and very special plants which can be catered to very extreme climates as well. But then sometimes I know one of these very specific walls in a building, and they try to landscape it every year. So they try to install new plants every year after snow, just so the building looks good with that beautiful landscape wall when you're walking around it. So I wouldn't really consider that something to be a very sustainable strategy. But I also know that now we've started looking for another project for something similar, for like a landscape wall. And I know now there are these companies who have created projects in Poland, who have created projects in Russia, who have created projects in Montreal itself with these specific technologies and plants where they sort of prevent the plant from freezing. So even in extreme temperatures and extreme weather conditions, these walls can survive. So when we're actually talking about that, then I would say it's something that works really well, because again, as I had mentioned, the heat island effect, these walls really help for that, because then all your surface that would absorb the heat reduces dramatically. Like you don't have any of that surface. Again, irrigation becomes relatively easier because you have your rainfall, so it's much easier to irrigate these walls. But I would say that it's a strategy that should be carefully considered when looking at a project, because it's sustainable, but sometimes it would require so much energy and effort to just make it happen that sometimes it's not able to get it back in its lifetime. Like for example, here, like they put new plants every year in that wall. I'm pretty sure that in that 1 year, it can't save that much energy that they're actually putting in to make that wall happen. So I feel like that sort of a circular analysis should always be done when we're considering sustainable strategies, that yes, we are doing this, but are we getting the same back from it? If not, then it's a strategy that's not worth considering.
Yeah. Any more questions from students? I have a question for both Shrey
Incidentally,
and...
I just, before, if there's no question coming from the student.
Chetna ma'am, can I ask that question?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah. For Shrey and Mayank both. So do you think in academics, is it Is it okay the way we are learning sustainability as just one of the electives, or do you think design should be, about sustainable? That should be the approach when you are designing. Usually, I hope you know that it's one of the electives that we are taught for a brief period of 6 months, or most of them don't even select it, and then probably later on, if you want to do a master's and then spend 1 or 2 more years in it, or do you think that is the way design should be?
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, go
So,
for it. You want to say something?
so personally, yeah, I mean, I would just say that. So honestly, till now, I think we had the option of choosing it or not choosing it, but we're slowly moving towards a time when we don't really have the option left for us. So I remember back when I was studying, I could have thought of using a strategy or not, but at least now, for example, I see here that most of the strategies that I talked about in my projects, they're a mandate from the city itself. So when I'm talking about efficient roof assemblies, efficient wall assemblies, the heat island effects, the landscape requirements, I would say 75% of what we're doing is actually required to be done by the city itself. And I'm pretty sure that soon, and I'm sure it's the same in Italy as well, they have these certain energy standards that you have to follow. Otherwise you won't really meet the basic requirements of the code. And I think it's something that will eventually start happening everywhere because like I was saying, we won't really have the option of choosing it or not choosing it after a point.
I would like to add on to this thing one thing. Yeah, it's completely correct. Like what Mayank said, it's completely correct. Although I would say one more thing, Italy by in itself is a very, very highly sustainable country. Like what even yesterday, Sushma was talking about it, that here their idea of restoring, reusing, it's like it's completely in their culture, the idea of sustainability is highly, highly, let's say, present. But what Mayank said also about now coming to the technical part of sustainability, like there are so many things here, for example, in Italy that, if, for example, you need to get your building approved, you need to have these strategies. There is no other way. And according to me, until the municipality forces you, you know, that if you need your building or your project to be approved and built, you need to have these aspects that are present in your building, in your, whether it is about colors, it's about, even for example, I was doing a small project. It was a villa here in Italia, and in this villa also we had this idea of using even the kind of color, the type of roof, which belongs to the climate, which they can accept. The here they call it the comune, which is the municipality. They accept only and only if you are using these strategies, let's say. So even if you want it, it becomes a part of it. Like even if you want it, like, I mean, what I mean to say is, like, what your question was before, a primary aspect, they even here it's a part of it, let's say, a part of the project. But what I mean to say is, until and unless, according to me, in India they also force, let's say, it's not a correct way to say force, but yeah, until you put it in the guidelines, it will always be secondary. It will become primary if it becomes a part of the guidelines, according to me. And sooner or later, it's going to happen everywhere in the world. Like here, okay, here there are other aspects of sustainability also. Like for example, just a very small idea of garbage. When you do the segregation of the garbage, here it's mandatory. Here, every municipality, all the things they have, it's mandatory. You have to do it. So it's a part, it's in their culture, and they make it a point that it's compulsory. And if you make it compulsory, people have to follow it, and then it becomes primary, let's say. And I think so in our academics, in Indian academics, let's say, I think so. Firstly, sooner or later, they're going to do it. And secondly, I mean, it's time to do it now after all this pandemic and everything. So I hope, like, this is what I could say.
I agree with you. I think it's time to do it because eventually all these students, they would probably join all these municipalities and they would eventually be working with these students. So it's something that should be incorporated in us and in all the other students at a very early age. So when we take on these responsibilities, we're already aware of what needs to be done. So
Yes.
It's true. Yes.
Any more questions coming in from the students?
No, there is some.
There is one question that says very small space like in a bungalow, like in a bungalow raised garden design. In which point will be considered for the design landscape? Yep. I think to very briefly answer that, I would say if the first thing, it's definitely good because again, the heat island effect, the water reuse and everything, it works well with this. But you have to understand the kind of plants that you're using because a lot of times I would say because you don't necessarily require a very very high, very detailed or very complicated intervention. Sometimes you could actually use simpler, how do you say, simpler assemblies and simpler roof compositions like green compositions. In which case you won't really require a lot of effort, money, and energy wasted. So you have these additions that could be done to your roof, and then you can have these addition roof assemblies which can be just fixed on top of what you already have. And I think that's it. I would just say that if you're having a roof garden, I would say just make sure that you're using the water efficiently, your rainwater efficiently, probably, because you would require to irrigate it, and it's not the best to actually use your drinking water to do it. So I think the smallest answer would be that for that.
And I think so also they are saying about a garden design, like a raised garden design, which is I think so. But I would say that, if I understood the question correctly by Khushbu, so I would also say that, when you are designing even a small landscape space, then also it's very beneficial to provide the the user with a variety of spaces, even if it's a small space, whether you are doing a public like a piazza, like which is a public space, or if you are doing a garden design, like whether it's public or private. What I mean to say is by this sentence, that still the variety in a space, I think so, should be given to the user. I'm talking more in the terms of designing. That's what I personally believe, that if you provide the user with more, more variety and more, let's say, like what, again, the idea multi-purpose space, using the space for various reasons, various uses, so that it's not, let's say, having a particular kind of use, because let's say today you have a certain need, but tomorrow your needs will change, and your space needs to answer to those needs. It needs to answer, it needs to be highly adaptable to the needs. That's what I can say in terms of design. Then technical aspects Mayank just covered. He was talking about the strategies to answer these things. But yeah, so
Yeah. So yeah, Mayank, your presentation, your thesis definitely showed your interest in sustainability, the passion that you have, that you're working towards right now. And we also saw the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle, which have been intelligently used in design. Post pandemic, we have also seen how do you get sustainability inside your interior spaces. That is, for example, getting the greens inside, having a small balcony with pots, plants, probably growing your own food to some small extent, like
Yep.
having tomatoes, chilies, or whatever. So we saw some design applications in a similar manner. We also saw certain mixed use trends and some newer trends like having electric cars. And yeah, there are, of course, pros and cons for that.
Yep.
And reusing a space smartly. So we saw all these solutions coming up in Mayank's presentation. Yeah, thank you, Mayank, for the lovely presentation that you gave. And
Thank you for
thanks,
having me.
Shrey, once again for adding on. So we'll
thank
move
you.
on to the vote of thanks by Uday sir.
Hello, good evening and namaste to everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to extend the vote of thanks on this concluding day. On the behalf of Sir Vithaldas Thakarse College of Home Science, Autonomous, SNDT Women's University, Mumbai, India, I, Architect Uday Govalkar, Assistant Professor, Department of Resource Management, would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Architect Shrey Upadhyaya and Architect Mayank Shekhawat for their valuable time, inputs, sharing their knowledge and expertise on this international worldwide platform on the theme of global scenario of practices, perspective, and designing spaces organized by Department of Resource Management. To begin with, I will summarize first session, the very interesting informative presentation by architect Shrey Upadhyaya, an architect and landscape designer from Italy. He expressed his thoughts on the topic of flexibility and modularity in living spaces on current scenario, showcasing his various design projects. Then the second session by architect Mayank Shekhawat, an architect and urban landscape designer from Canada. He expressed his views, ideas, and talked about sustainability in residential and landscape architecture. Architect Shekhawat showcases and gave a wonderful presentation on the design projects. Special thanks to Ms. Sushma Rao, designer and artist, the speaker of yesterday's first day of the webinar, the first session, sharing her invaluable experiences of her work and professional journey. We hope that with this presentation and discussion by both the professionals, it will inspire, motivate the new generation architects and interior designer with their unique way of designing, thought process, concept development, space planning, material management, and execution of design in the field of architecture, interior designing, and landscape architecture. So, again, we are glad to have these three young, dynamic professional resource person for our 2 days international webinar. Now, our heartfelt thanks to all the wonderful audience, those who have registered and attended this international webinar and got the program with a great success. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the encouragement by our principal, Dr. Jagmeet Madan, for encouraging us. Now, I would like to mention the people behind the scene who have contributed significantly for planning and execution of this event. I would like to mention our college vice principal, Ms. Manjiri Bhalerao, for her constant support. I would like to specially mention that this interesting and important initiative was taken by our head of the department, Ms. Chetna Raje, associate professor, who also conceptualized this international webinar for the department. Finally, I am glad to be a part of a wonderful team without which we cannot operate effectively. Our senior teacher, Ms. Hemani Malhotra, associate professor, young enthusiastic teachers, Ms. Prachi Patel, Ms. Parul Vats, for their consistent coordination and efforts to make this webinar a successful venture. We are also thankful to our department staff members Ms. Gulnar Siddiqui and architect Sharmistha Devarkar for their active participation. And our dear enthusiastic students for their help wherever required. We are also thankful to our technical team members, Mr. Alton and Mr. Viren, for their valuable support. Now, with these few words, we are closing this event with our national anthem. I will request kindly play our national anthem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Uday.
पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगल दायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
So thank you everyone for your participation. Thank you, Uday. And we declare this webinar closed. It was a very good event, and special thanks to our resource persons who have done an exceptional job on both the days. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please fill up the feedback forms. I think the link is put in the chat box. You'll get an e-certificate which is generated against the feedback form. So I request all of you to please do that.